Welcome to Reason for Truth. I'm your host, Stevie Garofalo. Something a little bit different this week. I'm just going to play audio. There's not going to be any video, but this is on YouTube and both the podcast channel, both the Reason for Truth channel, or channels. Today I want to share with you just a little talk I did over at the National Conference Christian Apologetics at Southern Evangelical Seminary, just talking about persevering through persecution. So hope you enjoyed today. Hope you get a few things from it. We edit it down, make it a little shorter. So God's blessings to you. Let's stay strong. Listen, you know perseverance creates character, and character produces hope. And hope never fails us in Jesus Christ. So God's blessings to you. Let's say we are unto death a Christian. Persevere through persecution. Let's just jump right in. I want to break this down to 4 parts. We ought not be surprised when the world hates us. Number 2, persecution is a blessing. Number 3, knowing what holds us back. And number 4, I want to ask you the question. I want you to think and answer for yourself, am I unto death a Christian? So one of the most difficult truths to grasp is that the world hates us. But I think at this point we all figured that out. It doesn't mean that I have people that are atheists that like me. It's not true. But in general, that's what the Scripture says. And it says, and that's despite our toleration of, we're supposed to be a culture of tolerance. But that's not really the world we live in. Jesus said, if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as of its own. It's true. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That's why the world hates you. John 15, 18 to 27 verses. Just simply explains the fact. I don't think it needs a whole lot of words. You can think about that, but it says what it says. Well, why does the world hate us? Because we're different, number 1. Number 2, because we bear Christ's name. Number 3, what we stand for exposes their sin. Just by living the Christian life, it bears. Now, number 1, we're different. Now, if you ask my wife, or any of my students, they'll tell you I'm different. When your neighbor, family member, or worse, persecutes you, it's because we're different. Number 2, we bear Christ's name. If you don't bear Christ's name, we need to be proclamation, not declaration. Now, what Jesus' disciples didn't understand what it was at first, but they did later. And I think we're finding that in the United States. We've had freedom of religion for so long. This whole thing that we're dealing with, and I've been preparing for it because I've been in SES since 2000. And Dr. Geisler and Dr. Howe brothers and Dr. Levin, they've been warning us of what's coming socially for years. And I'm about as prepared as you can get. And I'm still not used to it. I got kids. So, because I have kids, you never prepare. Lord's in control. He's going to provide. He's going to provide for your generation. You guys are going to carry the mantle. My goal in my ministry is not to get in front of you. I don't need all that. We reach people, 4,000 people on podcast a month. I'm going to get behind you. You guys, you got to put you guys, take the next. Let the old guys go take a rest and sit on the beach at least once a year. Decoration, proclamation. You guys were definitely younger. Oregon college shooter. Remember this? 2015. Does anybody remember this? Not many people remember this. Christian students, October 2015, in one classroom, this is one of those shoot-ups, right? In Oregon, one classroom shooter, Chris Harper Mercer, singled out Christian students to murder. Witness Anastasia Boynton. This is a CNN, okay? Okay? Said this. What is your stated religion? Chris asked. If Christian, he said, good, because you're a Christian, you're going to see God just about 1 second. Boynton's father, Stacy, told CNN, relaying his daughter's account while she underwent surgery for treat for a gunshot wound to her spine. So what would you say? Here is NBC, MSN. These are all, you can tell, very conservative. At least back then they were certainly being funny. Another account came from Autumn Bakary, who described NBC News that her brother JJ witnessed in the room when the shootings occurred. This is her quote. This is right out of this source. Bakary said at one point the shooter told people to stand up before asking whether they were Christian or not. Bakary's brother told her that anyone who responded yes was shot in the head. If they said other or didn't answer, they were shot elsewhere in the body. We think this is far away. Is this common or any of us going to face this? Probably not. But the point is, my wife says, you're always looking for a response. Well, yeah. It's part of my personality. I love response. So this way you don't fall asleep. Well, because why? Because we bear his name. Okay? The world hates us because, number 3, we expose their sin. A lot of times, this is how we live our life. An omission to participate, remember I told you about my neighbor, is to expose the world's sin. Now, I'm not calling having beer or having wine. I'm Italian, we love wine. That's part of the thing.
Italians, by the way, you think they drink wine at dinner. They don't really get drunk. It's part of what they do. I think there's fine with alcohol, is my opinion, but I think the abuse of their, which is what our culture is made of it, has made a mess of things. When a school or office policy seems to single you out, or just by living rightly, you expose their sin. It's amazing how you could just live the Christian life and your witness exposes your sin. Take heart, you are not alone. The world hates Christ, therefore the world hates us. Okay? So how is persecution a blessing? And this one was a tough one. I'm like, how do I explain to these people that I'm going to say it's a blessing? Persecution is a blessing. Now let's talk about that, all right? Jesus said twice, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteous sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:10, that means something, right? Blessed are you when others revile and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Matthew 5:11. It's pretty strong. Peter and James I want to dig into this. Peter encourages suffering readers, and he says this, but even if you should suffer for righteousness sake, you will be blessed. Well, how's that going to happen, Peter? Teaches us the same. James, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. James 1:12. America's mindset contains confusion as to the meaning of blessing. And so that's where I want to get to. So when Jesus says, when the Bible says, listen, persecution is a blessing, we have to look at what the meaning blessing means. This is where everything changes. This challenges the American mindset. I'm not busting on America. I'm just saying you could say the same probably in Europe and all Western cultures. It's conditioned to think that blessings are always pleasant. They're the happiness. Listen, you got to admit, you go to your neighbor, oh, it's blessed. I got a friend of mine. He's funny. He's African American. He's my friend. I hate when he says, I love what he says. He bless you. Be blessed. This part of the culture, blessed. We like those blessings, and that's true. That is a blessing. So what is he saying here? Well, let's look at the word joy versus happiness. Someone asked me that. Actually, Jason said, Steve, what's joy versus happiness? I said, that's a good question. Happiness is external. That's when you get a new iPhone, and it works like does some cool emojis. I can send to my friends and make little characters up. The joy is found when you're hanging upside down in a prison like Paul. Paul, Peter, and James challenge us as to what the Bible means by blessed, and that's what I want to look on. So there's various definitions, rather, of the word blessed. It could be blessed, happy, or fortunate, okay? All holds a measure of truth, as we've talked about. But the Greek word for blessing is makarios. That's what I call it. You want to do a little dance. Makarios. And if it's Greek, they can do that. So anyways, in Greek it means self-containment. This is important. To be makarios or makarios, it means that meant that they all had material blessings, physical possessions needed to exist without worry. Now, those things are food, water, and cover, right? But let's look. You may not know this. Anybody here familiar with the Greek Isle of Cyprus? Wow. It's called the Makarios Island. That's what it means. Yeah. The blessed isle. Why is that? Because the inhabitants never had to leave the shores. In those days, they had everything they needed to be self-sustained. They really didn't, for the most part, need any imports. We were oil independent, right? We were Makarios, man. We got hospitals. We could pretty much exist as America. We have such resources. Because its inhabitants never had to leave its shores. They had all they needed to be content. The island was Makarios, self-contained, and they had lush vegetation and fruit. And this carries over because you're using the word in that time span. I always say in the Bible, you have to take it within context. That word used then means that word used then. Okay? The idea carries over the biblical text, blessed, with one modification. When God blesses you, he gives his stamp of approval. God never blesses anything he does not approve of. Paul said this in his Roman prison before his execution. For Demas, verse 10, because he loved this world, he deserted me. Remember? He followed the things of the world. He deserted me and has gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, and Titus to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Alexander, the metalworker, did me a great deal of harm. I think the worst thing that you can really, obviously the worst thing is to be hung or be put to death, right, or be put in prison. But Paul lost his friends. When Paul was in prison, you understand, he had people taking advantage. He had a big platform. He was the guy with the big platform. And he said, boy, these guys are all just poaching on me. but God bless if they're doing God's work. That's the tough part about doing ministry, by the way. So you're right. It's a good point. Thank you for pointing that out. We always say, well, when I'm weak, I'm strong, right? That's true. And, I've experienced a lot of things in my life, and I still wonder. I mean, after you walk with the Lord for decades and decades and decades, and you see that you really should be down for the count, you should be broke, you should be out, and it's amazing how God provides for you, and He's going to provide you even in times of persecution. So we'll understand what it means to be carried along in difficult circumstances in ways we can't explain. And I like that, carried along in difficult circumstances. Anybody remember this lady? This is during the Second Iraq War. Kayla Mueller, she was all over the news, back when the news actually said the word Christian, not long ago. She said this, I've been shown to give you an idea, she was taken a hostage by the Taliban. She was a missionary helping the people now I can't remember, I think it was Iraq, going back. She got captured and she was made a queen. So she wouldn't go along with it. They forced her to try to make her queen or something like that or a wife of the head of the Taliban. And she said no. She was in jail, and what happens is she eventually died by way of a U.S. missile, which not our fault. They had her in an undisclosed building. She says, I've been shown in darkness light, and this is her actual letter. She wrote it and snuck it out. She says, I'm going to read you a few excerpts. I have been shown in darkness light, plus I've learned that even in prison one can be free. I'm grateful. I have come to see that there is good in every situation. Sometimes we just have to look for it. Now listen, this lady's in the Middle East, in a prison, being forced probably to do things she doesn't want to do with a Taliban leader. Then she says, I remember Mom always telling me that in the end, the only one you really have is God. I have come to a place and experience where in every sense of the word, I have surrendered myself to our Creator. Literally, there was no else plus God. This is her letter, it was a little choppy, plus your prayers. This is kind of what she wrote. Because, I guess, literally. I have felt tenderly cradled in a free fall. Those words have never left me. I have felt tenderly cradled in a free fall. I think about the World Trade Center. Again, you guys probably a little younger. When the World Trade Center comes in, if you can Google it, it's not a good picture. It haunts me. When the towers were on fire, the fire was 2,000 degrees. You have two choices. Go and get burned up or jump. They got pictures of people jumping. There ain't no jumping off that roof. And I think they were not, as believers, she's saying, I'm feeling tenderly cradled. That's the picture that comes to my mind. Carried along by difficult circumstances. Persecution equals blessing in proper context. So this is not one of the happier, but I think I did this on here because I don't care if there's 100 people, 20 people. As my wife says, you're going to have the right people to hear your message for today. Okay? There's a lot of other fun things. If you go to my YouTube channel, you may be entertained a little bit more. But being blessed within the context of persecution and suffering is not like experiencing the blessing of a new Xbox or iPhone or financial, promotion. Let us now look at the presentation. Suffering allows us inner contentment, peace. It comes to knowing to stand approval by God. What time do we have? Is it till noon? 12:05. Okay, thank you. Persecution allows us to know Christ more, but what holds us back? This is the key. I'm going to tell you exactly, knowing what holds us back. And there's one word for it. It's a 4-letter word, but it's not a curse word. Anybody want to take a guess what it is? There's one thing that you probably know this, but you maybe have not thought about it. Loss. Persecution means loss of freedom, loss of money, loss of promotion, loss of your job, loss of friends, loss of your country, maybe, or what they think is right. Knowing what holds us back. It's important to understand what holds us back. And this is tough. So, what keeps us from intimate knowledge of Christ? Well, better yet, it's preventing us from sharing the sufferings. Our gain is life, and it has advantages and privileges, but we don't want to give up through suffering. Now, I'm going to give you some examples. We have status, job, right? We talked about that. Possessions, reputation. You might even lose a family and friends for standing for truth, possibly even life itself. Losing life itself is, listen, that's the things. I don't want you to walk out here thinking, but to be put under the wheel of a truck and down. None of us are probably going to face that. Probably not. But I'm telling you, You have to ask your question. So you got to say, where's the line, and what? If you don't know where the line is, if you're either committed to Christ or you're not. That's what I'm saying. So delicately approach that. It doesn't mean you have to run out and tell people you're going to hell, blah blah blah. So I want to look at Apostle Paul. See, think about Apostle Paul. Now, Apostle Paul was a rock star, right? He was a Pharisee. The man was wealthy. The man had a great job. I'm sure he had a pension. They didn't have pension those days. But he went from enjoying, he was in a very prestigious, remember who oversaw the first martyr, his death? Apostle Paul. Saul turned Paul, but he was Saul at the time. So here's a guy who oversaw the death of the first Christian martyr. And he went from enjoying, he had a good job, and he went from being arrestor of Christians to the one arrested. So when he got saved, how did he... You guys tell me. You remember how he got out of the city? Anybody remember? Lord, can you imagine that? I mean, come on. That'd be like saying I was born in America, I have the freedom of speech, I got a good job, let's say I'm the president, or I'm a congressman, or I'm a business person, or a minister, and I've enjoyed these things. And I'm a high-level guy, and all of a sudden, I'm getting smuggled out of the country in the back of a hot box truck. I mean, it's kind of what the picture in a modern setting is. But something wonderful happened through this process, and that through suffering, Paul came to know Jesus, his Lord, better. And he became intimate with the Savior and learning what it meant. And that is true for us. There is no way we're going to be salt and light if we don't really understand. Right? There's no way without persecution. The question I want to ask you this: what am I willing to surrender? Well, I'm not preaching to you. I ask myself this question every day. I don't want to lose my stuff. I've worked hard for most of my life. I will lose my house. I want to pass things on to my kids. I want to enjoy what I have. But what am I hesitant to sacrifice? What am I reluctant to lose? Ultimately, God may not require you to suffer the loss of anything or different things for different people. So that leads us to the last final question. Are you unto death a Christian? This is a tough pill to swallow. Our commitment as a disciple of Christ requires, number one, be willing to renounce ourselves. Tied to the first commandment, if anyone would come before and let him deny himself, Luke 9:23. Be willing to sacrifice yourself. Take up your cross, 9:24. We'll be willing to follow Jesus. 3 out of 4 students are going to leave their faith and down the Rashi Christi booth. That's a well-known Barna research thing. That's the way it is. There's a reason for that, Suffering produces spiritual fortitude. For if you don't know, the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, James 13. Here's the deal. I get 3 kids. I get up a lot of days, some days, and I just go, oh my gosh. I mean, the days are long, and I think to myself, that's steadfast. Steadfast means you just keep pushing ahead. Because at the end of the day, things are going to go up, right? Things go up, things come down. The lack of spiritual fortitude is because we have not been toughened. About the reality of persecution, we trivialize cross-bearing. We'd see it as any point of discomfort. The reality is blessing is a curse, okay? Persecution means you're blessed, you're not cursed. That's hard to see because we don't really want to give up what we have, and that's understandable. I don't either. But I think you just have to say, Jesus, no Jesus. That's where we're at, right? Are you still willing to say, I'm going to death a Christian? I want you to think about that. That's deep. I don't expect me to go, yeah, but I want you to think about that. Listen, to come see me at my booth, sign up for my newsletter. We've now implemented another thing called Equipped Academy. We have now online courses where I teach my Equipped book. I can speak at your church and all that good stuff. We have a podcast. You want to subscribe. It's on podcast and YouTube and Rumble, whatever you like. I think at the end of the day, before we leave, let me just say this, especially for the younger generation, and that is just always keep your priorities straight. Doesn't mean don't get a job. Doesn't mean you can't be like Joseph. Joseph was he went to jail twice when he didn't. That's probably why he was the least sinner, I think, out of the whole Bible, in my opinion, is because he got unrighteously persecuted. Persecution is what makes you real. Oh, but never deny the Lord. And, okay. Thank you guys for hearing me out. This is a tough message. This is not an easy message for this younger generation. God's blessings to you guys.
Great. Hey, thank you for tuning in for another episode of Reason for Truth, man. Hope you got something out of that. Hope it encouraged you. Hope it informed you. listen, we need to stay strong in Christ through the difficult times that are here present and that lie ahead. We can be hopeful. We can be joyful. That's the bottom line, because the Spirit of God is with us. That is the bottom line. Listen, make sure you check out our other videos. We got actually over 600 audio podcasts in the queue, as well as we have over 200 now videos. You want to check those out? Make sure you subscribe, man, and then smash that little alert bell below. If you're on video, make sure you subscribe. Hey, do us a favor, man. Especially if you're in iTunes and you're listening on audio, it's real helpful for us, and it's it's very constructive. You consider giving us a 5-star rating or a rating otherwise, but really take the time to put some input. It doesn't take a lot of time. It'll really help us, connect with us, and it'll really help promote this channel. So I'd like to ask if you take a minute just to do that, no matter where in the world you're at, because we were reaching about every continent in the world, and thanks Asia, we take you Europe, Africa, North America, South America, Central America. God's blessings to you. Hey, make sure again you subscribe, smash that alert bell. We'll see you over at the next episode. I'm your host, Stevie Garofalo, and this is your Reason for Truth for today.